So this one is still included sa exam natin, atoms, molecules, and ions. And I believe I have already started with this one, like the atomic theory. For the history in the discovery of atoms, we have there the first name Democritus. He was the one who first named the particles that we can see sa matter as atomos, but he described it as very small and at the same time indivisible. Dili daw siya pwede ma-divide. Ano siya ang meaning sa word na atomos? Uncuttable or indivisible. And then after kay Democritus, the next name here in the history of the discovery of atom is the English scientist and school teacher named John Dalton. So he was the one who gave the definition and the description of what atom is really is. So we have here to summarize the work of John Dalton. Mao ni siya ang iyahang na-discover sa iyahang experiment. Number 1, elements are composed of extremely small particles called atoms. Remember class, do not forget, our elements are the simplest form of matter. And when you say simplest form, hindi na natin siya ma-divide even if gumawa pa tayo or mag-conduct pa tayo ng mga chemical reactions or chemical na mga experiments. But nevertheless, when you say elements, since they are also considered matter, they have small particles called atoms. Okay? And then the next thing that was discovered by John Dalton in his investigation was all atoms of a given element are identical, having the same size and the same chemical properties. So anong ibig sabihin yan? Pag isang element, the example sa ating elements, we have the first one in the periodic table, the hydrogen. So we have here the hydrogen. So lahat daw class ng hydrogen existing sa Earth, parehas lang class, identical yung atom nila. Pag sinabing hydrogen, it contains hydrogen atoms. And all hydrogen atoms existing have the same size and the same chemical properties. Therefore, magkaiba class ang atom ng isang element and another element. Pag pareha ang hydrogen, pag helium na yung dinidiscuss na natin, ibang atom na din ito siya. So iba na din ang size, different na ang size, and different na din ang chemical properties. So that's how you differentiate the atoms of the different elements. So magkaiba. Magkaiba pag magkaibang element. Pero pag the same kind of element, then the same din ang atom, the same ang size nila, the same ang chemical properties. Now the third one, the third product of the investigation of John Dalton, we have here the compounds are composed of atoms of more than one element. Again, the compounds are composed of atoms of more than one element, meaning the elements class can combine with each other and then they will form the so-called compound. But they do so in ratio of the number of atoms. The ratio is definite. So for example, hydrogen and oxygen can combine together and they can form water. But the ratio class has to be definite or fixed, meaning you need 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen para ma-form mo yung water. Okay, the ratio again is definite. Or the carbon can also combine with oxygen to form carbon monoxide. Pero the ratio again is definite. You need 1 atom of carbon and 1 atom of oxygen to make this carbon monoxide. Now the ratio can be an integer or a simple fraction. So integer is whole number, but sometimes class we have chemical formula na simple fraction yung proportion ng isang element. And then another thing, a chemical reaction involves only the separation, combination, or rearrangement of atoms. Hindi siya magre-result in the creation of a new one or the destruction of the existing one. So anong ibig sabihin nito? When you say chemical reaction, atoms can separate. Example, you have asin, the sodium chloride. Pwede natin siyang i-separate. We can still get the sodium and also the chloride. Okay? Ma-retrieve pa natin siya. So this is allowed, the separation. But the combination is also allowed. We know this very well that elements can also combine with each other to form a compound. So this is the other way around. So pwede din yan siya. And lastly, we can also have rearrangement na mag-rearrange lang sila, but then you can still see the different elements in the resulting compound. Example, you have their carbon dioxide, tapos mag-react siya with water. This will give you carbonic acid. So this will be a combination reaction and a rearrangement. So kung nakita ninyo, you still have there the 2 hydrogen, 1 carbon, and atin yan siyang i-combine ang tatlong oxygen. That is why naging isang compound na lang instead of the 2 compounds in the reactant na side, naging isang product na lang siya. So that is also allowed, combination and or rearrangement of atom. Pero wala ka dyang makikita na new atom na ma-form or walang na-destroy. Kagaya nito, you have Na and Cl, you will still see that in the product. Or another here, magkahiwalay sila sa reactant and then magkadugtong na sila sa product, but nevertheless you can still see there the sodium and the chloride. And that is also true for this one. You can still see all the elements sa products. Walang na-create na bago, walang na-destroy. Yan talaga yan ang class rule natin yan sa chemical reaction. Okay? Walang new substance na ma-form, walang ma-destroy. Even if merong chemical reaction na nangyari. So I hope clear yan siya sa inyo. Any question? Anything na hindi nyo naintindihan sa work ni John Dalton sa result ng kanyang investigation? Wala? So let's have here, class, the law of definite proportion. So you listen because we will have another quiz tomorrow. Kay kulang akong quiz sa inyo ha. Ikaduha pa lang itong quiz. Gaina. Sa lecture ha, sa lab, daghan tag quiz, pero those are separating manggod. So we are actually required to have 3 quizzes for every term. So sa prelim, dapat naapod ni tulo ka quiz. So ikaduha pa lang man ito mag-quiz sa ulit ugma. So you listen, kay gamay raman ni ang ako ang na-discuss sa inyo ha sa next nga lesson. Dinhi lang po na ko kuwaon class ang ako ang quiz for tomorrow. So that will be a very short one. Now let's talk about the law of definite proportion. This is actually a product of the work of John Dalton. The law of definite proportion. Actually, na-mention ko na to kanina. Ang law of definite proportion, it states that when these elements form compounds, they do so in constant proportion, meaning fixed ang ratio nila. When you say fixed ang ratio, di ba sabi ko kanina, pag si hydrogen and si oxygen mag-combine to form water, they do so in constant or fixed proportion, meaning we need 2 hydrogen here and 1 oxygen to form this water. Fix yan siya. Pag water, talagang H2O yan. 2 hydrogen at 1 oxygen. Pag naging ganito na siya, 2 hydrogen, 2 oxygen, hindi na talaga yan siya water class. That's another compound. And remember, we call this hydrogen peroxide. So anong ibig sabihin ng law of definite proportion? When the elements form compound or compounds, they do so in fixed or constant ratio. Okay? So isang compound, fixed ang ratio niya ng bawat elements na component niya. Hindi pwede magbago. Hindi tayo nakakita ng water class na ganito. Walang water na ganito. Always talaga yan siya H2O. That's law of definite proportions. Any question? Any question about the law of definite proportion? Wala. So naintindihan yon. So let us move on to another law. This is still a product of the work of John Dalton, the law of multiple proportion. So ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng multiple? Kanina definite. Ngayon naman multiple proportions. So to simply explain this, pag sinabing multiple proportion, the two or more elements can form compounds. Like example, carbon plus oxygen. Pwede siya class mag-result into carbon monoxide. Pero carbon monoxide is just one carbon and one oxygen. Pero the same elements can still combine, but this time it will form another compound. Example, carbon dioxide. But sa carbon dioxide, we need one carbon and two oxygen. So anong ibig sabihin ng law of multiple proportions? Yung mga elements natin, class, they can combine to form compounds, pero pwedeng maraming compounds ang ma-form nila. Iba-iba lang ng proportion. Okay? So ang similarity ni carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide ay parehas silang merong carbon, meron din silang oxygen. So ayan, si carbon and si oxygen, pwede siya maraming compound na ma-form. Actually, si hydrogen din and si oxygen, pwede din class maraming compound na ma-form. Iba-iba lang ng proportion. So kanina may example tayo, water. For water to be formed, kailangan niya ng dalawang hydrogen and isang oxygen. But the same elements can also combine to form another compound. Yung another example ko na naman na hydrogen peroxide. Pero iba ang proportion. Dalawang hydrogen and dalawang oxygen. That is what you call the law of multiple proportion. Pag meron kang dalawang elements dyan, pwede sila mag-combine and mag-form ng maraming compounds. Again, maraming compounds ang pwede nila ma-form, but ang kaibahan lang, iba-iba sila ng proportion. Any question? Can you see the difference of the law of definite proportion and the law of multiple proportion? Any question or clarification? Nalibog ba? Murag parehas lang man to imong ginamin. Paingon kag law of definite proportion ha kay compound, and this compound has definite proportion when it comes to its component. So pag mingon ko unsa ang chemical formula ni water, H2O yun na siya, definite yun na siya. Fix ang ratio sa mga components niya. So H2O, that's law of definite proportion. Pero pag sinabing law of multiple proportions, ang mga elements natin, for example, dalawang elements, pwede sila mag-combine, tapos they will give you maraming compounds. So parehas sa carbon and si oxygen. Pwede siya mag-form ng carbon monoxide, pwede din carbon dioxide. So ang similarity nila, parehas silang may carbon, parehas silang may oxygen. Ang difference nila, they have different proportions. Pag sinabing carbon monoxide, CO. Pag sinabing carbon dioxide, CO2. Okay? And then tapusin ko lang, last na talaga ito, we have law of conservation of mass. Ito yung sinabi ko kanina na matter cannot be destroyed nor created. Kahit na class may chemical reaction na nangyari, ang new substance na ma-form, wala ding madedestroy. So kung example si water, pag hiwalayin natin si hydrogen and si oxygen, walang new substance. hydrogen pa rin ito. This time, pag hiniwalay natin, hydrogen pa rin siya. Again, walang new substance na form and wala ding na-destroy kasi you still have here the oxygen. Okay? So you still have here the oxygen. No new substance is created. Wala ding na-destroy. Ang tawag dyan, law of conservation of mass. Kasi kung ano ang mass nito, itong water, kahit paghiwalayin natin sila, ang mass nito and ang mass niyan will still be equal to the original mass. That's again called law of conservation of mass. So hanggang dyan muna yung ating discussion. Tomorrow, we will continue with the work of John Dalton and we will be talking about the structure of the atoms. So atoms, molecules, and ions. So for the meantime kasi, it's already 8:28. So you need to attend pa your next class. So hanggang dyan muna. We will have a very short quiz tomorrow before tayo mag-continue. So ang quiz ko class, dun lang manggagaling sa diniscuss ko ngayon. Okay? Questions before tayo mag-end and mag-attend kayo ng next class niyo?